Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Waiting to rise again.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
Locking down the middle of the day. Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Hour 2, Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. Hope your work week's in the rearview mirror. If not, we'll get you to the finish line here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. We're going to talk a little bit of SMU basketball coming up with Dean Ralsky. He covers the Mustangs for On 3. LSU and SMU coming up tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So we'll talk to Dean about that at the bottom of this hour. Can the Saints stop Jaden Daniels? Recent history would suggest probably not, but we'll talk about that in the next segment. And here I want to talk some transfer portal with LSU as the Tigers finally, after defection, have actually added a player in the transfer portal in Bauer Sharp. He was a tight end at Oklahoma this past season. He's originally from Dothan, Alabama. He signed originally out of high school at Southeastern Louisiana, played there for 3 years. He redshirted in 2021 as a quarterback. He made the switch to tight end during spring practice entering the 2022 season. He started 2 games there, made 11 catches, then became the starting tight end in 2023 at Southeastern before transferring to Oklahoma. If you're unaware, you probably should be, because 2 weeks ago we broke down Oklahoma significantly. That was the worst offense in the Southeastern Conference this year. So it should come as no surprise that Bauer Sharp did not light it up in Norman. He had 42 catches for 324 yards and 2 touchdowns. But they didn't have a quarterback that could throw it to him. They started the year with Jackson Arnold. He wasn't very good. They went to Michael Hawkins Jr. He wasn't very good. So I'm not as concerned with Bauer Sharp's production at Oklahoma as I am with the type of player that he is. Bauer Sharp is big. He is physical. Brian Kelly talked about that today, and he really liked what Oklahoma was able to do with Bauer Sharp in the running game. He's a guy that is 6'4". He is 235 pounds. And 245 pounds now he's listed at by Oklahoma. And he's a guy that can get physical in the running game. They pulled him a little bit. They got him out on the perimeter a little bit. I think LSU fans are most familiar with Bauer Sharp because of that ill-fated interception that he floated up in the air on a potential double pass in Tiger Stadium a couple of weeks ago that Sage Ryan picked off. Not going to ask him to do a lot of double passes next year, I would hope. But he's exactly what they had to have. Luke Haas is a guy that visited. He was from Arkansas, and I'm not telling you they can't take Luke Haas. I'm telling you that it's probably unlikely at this point when you return Trey'Dez Green and you bring Bauer Sharp into the equation. You got to compete pretty heavily if you're Luke Haas for playing time at LSU. NIL does what NIL does, but I'm not sure that LSU is going to be able to nab another tight end kind of from the top of the market, and I think that's what Luke Haas is. But you get one. You get Bauer Sharp, good athlete, physical, big, can do the things you need him to do. I still have high hopes for Trey'Dez Green at LSU. I think he's going to be a great player at LSU. Caught a couple touchdowns this year, but y'all know what Trey'Dez Green is. He's a basketball player. Like, the guy is 6'7". He's 230 pounds. He's just not right now a physical point of attack blocker, and he will fail more often than not when you put him in that situation. Now, we talked to Brian Kelly early in the season, and he said that Trey'Dez Green was a willing blocker, but they were working on that. I talked to Trey'Dez Green along with the local media back earlier in the season, and he said, I'm trying. I'm getting better at it. It's just not something I did at all in high school, so we're learning. Trey'Dez Green in high school went out wide, and they threw him the ball up in the air, and he went and caught it because he was the best athlete on every field he stepped on. So he's going to be useful, but you had to bring this type of player in. And J.D. LaFleur comes in, and he's big and strong and physical, and Mason Taylor showed you can do it as a freshman. So if you've got a situation where you got Bauer Sharp as your veteran, you can plug J.D. LaFleur behind him. Trey'Dez Green is available. That's reasonable start for the tight end room. I'd like to add another one, but the truth be told, if you add another tight end, it's probably going to be a guy that's less expensive and a little bit down the line as far as prospects go. But that would be fine if you can add somebody that's 250 pounds and has no problem sticking their nose in there and knocking someone around. So Bauer Sharp, the first official transfer portal addition. This is not even a commitment. LSU's got paperwork. Brian Kelly talked about him by name today. So Bauer Sharp is officially in the boat. There were also some predictions made LSU's way today by the folks over at On3. Saw Steve Wiltfong as well as Pete Nakos predicted that Braylon Moore, a center from Virginia Tech, has been recruiting prediction machined, as they say, to LSU. You're talking about a guy in Braylon Moore who was a three-star high school prospect, signed at Virginia Tech, made 4 appearances on the offensive line for Virginia Tech in 2022, and then he has started for the last 2 years at center for Virginia Tech. He is 6'3". He's 303 pounds. He's got a couple years left to play, and he is a center. And this is a great get for LSU if they can get him. A 2-year starter at an ACC program is exactly what LSU needs out of the transfer portal. And you might say, well, that's the only position we have on the offensive line. DJ Chester's back. Everybody else is gone. Well, DJ Chester had a bit of a rough year at center. He's probably a better guard. And if you bring Braylon Moore in and then you kick DJ Chester out to a guard, that probably solidifies the middle of your line with a veteran who has proven he can do it, and then allows Chester to play a more comfortable position. You got Paul Mabenga, who came along, and now you're looking at the tackles, and you hope that Weston Davis and complete blank, Tyree Adams. There it was. It was coming. Tyree Adams can handle the left side, and Weston Davis can handle the right side, and you'll get to look at that, I'm assuming, in the bowl game against Baylor. But it's starting to take shape a little bit more. I said in my transfer portal wish list piece that I wrote at LouisianaSports.net last week that left tackle was my main wish. And I said, I'm getting a little specific here, but they don't have to have a left tackle. That's just generally where you get the best offensive lineman, and then you kind of move things around there. Center, I'm perfectly fine with. That's another one that's a pillar that you can move things around. And so if Braylon Moore he has not yet committed to LSU, but the folks over at On3 believe that that's potentially going to happen relatively soon. That would be a really, really good get for Brad Davis, Brian Kelly, and this LSU offensive line. They have got to solidify the offensive front. You've got Garrett Nussmeier back. You've got a stable of running backs, assuming everyone stays put, and you've got Caden Durham and Caleb Jackson and Harlem Berry, and you got JT Lindsey. You got a good class coming in. Like that's a good place to start, but none of that works without a good offensive line, and you're replacing 80% of yours from this past year. So if they can get Braylon Moore in the boat, a 2-year starter at an ACC program, I am very much for that. There are some other names that are very much in play right now, and they're names that we have talked about, but I think there could be some finality to these names in the next 48 hours. It's not lock, but it's very much being rumored about, because you started to see guys take 2 visits this week or 3 visits this week and start to understand what the market is and where they may be valued. And I think that there's a chance that LSU could, over the next 48 hours, reel in Berrien Brown from Kentucky and Jakeem Jackson from Florida. You're starting to hit those positions of need. You're still working at safety. You're still very much working at defensive end, but wide receivers, one where you got to go get one, and then you really feel like you probably need to bolster the secondary as well. There was almost no spot that LSU didn't need help. You could maybe point to quarterback, but I don't feel that way. I think you probably got to add another one. And you could point to running back as a spot they don't really have to go into the portal for. Outside of that and defensive tackle, you pretty much need everything. I'm not going to balk if they bring in a linebacker, although the linebacker depth looks okay. But everywhere else, they need bodies. Right now, you've got Bauer Sharp in at tight end from Oklahoma. Braylon Moore been predicted to you from Virginia Tech at center. And then, then I'm pointing towards Jakeem Jackson, corner from Florida, Berrien Brown, a wide receiver from Kentucky. And there's going to be a lot more. Again, this goes back to the segment I did at the top of the show. I don't often tell you I quote unquote had a conversation with someone who would know, and here's where things stand. I'm not trying to make stuff up, and I don't often have those types of conversations. I did this week with someone over around LSU, and I can say firsthand that LSU has significant amount of money to spend. And all I've said all week is we keep hearing that, And I know it to be true, but it doesn't do any good if it sits in the war chest. It's got to come out. And you're starting to see a little bit of that. And you're starting to see it at the top end of the transfer portal. Certainly Ole Miss, certainly A&M, certainly Texas, certainly Ohio State and Bama. And now you've got a new player that may be in the mix. And I talked about Will Helt, the edge rusher from Purdue. He's going to visit Clemson. And you might think, well, that makes sense. If he's one of the best edge rushers, Clemson's got one of the best programs over the last 10 years. That makes a lot of sense. But Clemson has never taken a defensive player in the transfer portal. Not once, ever. And they're starting to dip, which they had to. That was never going to be sustainable for Dabo to completely ignore the transfer portal. Now it appears they're in there. I don't know whether or not Dabo is willing to play ball and actually sit down at the table and talk about money like the other coaches are going to do. But Will Helt is looking at Clemson, and we'll see how that one shakes out. I know LSU is very interested in him as well. So things starting to happen, and I'll be candid with you. I think by the time I do my show on Monday at 1 o'clock, we'll have 2, 3, 4 commitments to talk about for LSU in the transfer portal. This is going to happen pretty quickly. Folks are out of school. They're out of finals. They're in the transfer portal. The NIL chests are ready to roll, and guys are going to be picking their spots here over the next 2 days. So we've seen one, Bauer Sharp. We'll see what happens next moving forward for LSU in the transfer portal. If you're looking for our LSU football content, you can always find it on YouTube, Hunt on LSU. But you don't have to go to YouTube to find it. We talked about this for the last couple of weeks. All of that, Hunt on LSU, as well as Hunt on Saints, our LSU channel and our Saints channel, they're also available via podcast form. So if you want to jump in and just get your Saints news, just get your LSU football news, and you don't really feel like going to YouTube, you can do so on Hunt LSU, Hunt on Saints. All part of the Hunt Palmer Show. We appreciate y'all's support all year long. When we come back, we'll talk about those New Orleans Saints. Jaden Daniels is coming to town. Maybe some of you LSU fans that bought a ticket, you're going to go watch, but we'll see if the Saints can slow Jaden Daniels down. That's coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets over at One Bath and Closets. Look, closet space may not be something a lot of men may think about. It may be, but it may not be. My case, I really didn't. But my wife moved into our first home. It was a great home for us. We brought our first child back to that home. We have great memories. The closet sucked. Like, that's just the way it is. And she hated it. She hated the fact that some of her coats were in that room, some of her coats were in that room. We had to put some stuff up in the attic in boxes. It was just disjointed because we had these little built-ins that just weren't great. And we would have had David Duvall come in and help us out, but we knew that we needed some more space with a growing family, so we were going to move anyway. We didn't make that call. You may not be moving. You can make that call. David Duvall and his team can completely transform your closet situation and customize it to your exact specifications. It's going to be functional for you, and it's going to look fantastic as well. David can promise that. He's going to leave the competition behind. Actually, he's going to do it right the first time and leave the competition behind. That's David Duvall at One Bath and Closets. Get that free consultation today at onebathandclosets.com. Onebathandclosets.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. We're brought to you by Cork's Cajun Fried Fish and Shrimp. Bit of a homecoming for Jaden Daniels. Much of a homecoming as can be for a guy who is from Southern California and played 3 years college football at Arizona State. But he certainly spent the last 2 years of his life in Baton Rouge at LSU, and then was the second pick in the draft after winning the Heisman Trophy. He heads to Washington, to an organization in complete disarray. But they have new ownership. They get a new coach, Dan Quinn, and Jaden Daniels has transformed what that organization has been. He's been part of that transformation. Of course, the Commanders started 4-1 on the season. At one point, they were 7-2. I think the highlight probably for them early in the year was Jaden out-dueling Joe Burrow in Cincinnati in a 38-33 win. But they go and absolutely hammer Arizona 42-14. They crushed the Browns 34-13. Lost a one-score game at Baltimore before hammering Carolina, doing enough to beat Chicago and beating the Browns. They played Pittsburgh to a 28-27 game, and then went to Philadelphia and lost by 8. the tough loss was the one to Dallas. That's a tough one to swallow for Washington. They come back and handle their business against Tennessee, 42-19 2 weeks ago. They come off of a bye now, and they come to New Orleans. And we know that New Orleans has had its issues with mobile quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts has famously really hurt this team in multiple matchups. I don't know that he went crazy in the game in week 2 this year or week 3 this year, but he's hurt the Saints and certainly beaten them a number of times. I was talking to Jordan off the air. Famously, Josh Dobbs comes out of nowhere, hadn't even been with a team in Minnesota at all, and he carves the Saints up. They just don't stop the run. Luke, who we talked to yesterday on the show, mentioned that Drew Lock ran for over 40 yards on this Saints team just a week ago, and that's a big problem when you deal with Jaden Daniels, who has a rushing touchdown in each of his last 2 games, had 4 rushing touchdowns in his first 4 games as an NFL starter, but did not have a rushing touchdown in the 7 games between them. I think a lot of people misconstrue athleticism for depending on the run. Lamar Jackson does not depend on his legs, and Jaden Daniels does not depend on his legs. I would argue Michael Vick depended on his legs. I would argue to an extent that Cam Newton depended on his legs as a runner. And then you've got guys like Doug Flutie ran around like a crazy person, but Jaden Daniels wins from the pocket. You look at his rushing totals this year, and after his first 3 weeks, where you're really trying to get acclimated to playing in the NFL, after his first 3 weeks as a starter, he has not had 10 rushing attempts but once, and that was against Cleveland. He usually runs the ball about 7 plays a game. They're going to do a little bit in the read option game, certainly around the line, around the goal line. They like to do some read option stuff and give him the option to run it. And then when the plays break down, he will move. But Jaden is now playing kind of like he did at LSU, where he's going to drop back and he's going to look down the field first. Then he's going to extend the play while looking down the field. And if that all breaks down, he'll take off. And he's still got elite speed. And he will do that at times. But this is not a guy who's running the ball 20 times a game, not a guy that's running the ball 15 times a game. I realize that you really can't do that in the NFL. In the Baton Rouge market here, we certainly talk about Diego Pavio when LSU played him as a mobile quarterback. He depends on his legs. He runs the ball like 18 times a game. Jaden doesn't do that. But the question is, can the Saints slow him down, and will this aspect of his game be pronounced against a defense, certainly a defensive personnel, even with Dennis Allen gone, that has really struggled to stop the running quarterback? I can't give a great reason why they're not good against running quarterbacks. They've had really good linebacker play with Demario Davis and whoever is there with him over the last 5 or 6 years. They've been athletic in the secondary for when you play zone and somebody's got to come up and make a play. Like, yeah, I don't trust Cam Jordan to necessarily go run down a quarterback, but like, not many defensive ends in the NFL can run down a mobile quarterback. So that's not unique to the Saints to have a bigger edge rusher there that's trying to get to the quarterback. I don't have a great reason for it unless they just play a ton of man coverage and don't allocate a player to the quarterback ever. I mean, Bo Nix had a big game against the Saints a couple weeks ago, and he ran the ball a good bit. And it's just it's a little bit puzzling to me. And I'm not the guy that's going to sit there and crunch numbers on the statistics over the course of 8 years of running quarterbacks. I'm not a guy that's going to go dive into the film and give you a great X and O breakdown of why the Mike backer is not necessarily attached to the quarterback. But I can tell you, just from watching the Saints, as you, the Saints fan, has done, no doubt, over the years, and you've seen it enough times where you can go, not good. And this is one of the last guys I think you want to see if you are New Orleans. So it's going to be incumbent upon this Saints team that doesn't rush the passer very well to stop the quarterback run. Like, you got to take your chances. You get an opportunity to get to the rookie quarterback, you got to get to him. But I think they're probably at, how do I want to phrase this? It's probably a better idea to be a little bit more timid in your pass rush to make sure that Jaden Daniels doesn't get outside and start to make plays out there. I'm not telling you he can't beat you from the pocket. He can beat you from the pocket. He's proven that. He's a really good player. There's a reason why not a lot of teams have slowed this team down. There's a reason why they scored 42 on Tennessee. There's a reason they scored 27 on Pittsburgh. Reason they scored 40 on Carolina. Reason they scored 34 on a good Cleveland defense, 42 on Arizona, 38 on the Bengals. Like, there's a reason they're running up big point totals. He's really good, and with McLaurin out there and whoever the second option is week to week, they've made it happen. But you've got to kind of pick your poison, because you can't try to do both. You can't get after him and take away open space in front of him, right? I think your best bet is to try to keep him from extending plays too long and making your young corners run out there and cover. That's just my 2 cents with the Saints and Jaden Daniels. I don't love the matchup currently with this Saints defense and this Commanders offense. I think Washington matches up very, very well. That's going to put the onus on a Saints offense to try to keep up in this game with Jake Haener at quarterback, which is probably a bigger story than this one, but we've already talked about that this week, so I figured I would change the angle for this specific matchup. I just don't think the Saints can keep up with Jake Haener and that wide receiver core. Like, maybe with that wide receiver core and a veteran in Derek Carr, they can do enough, but it feels like Haener's going to check it down a lot. It feels like Haener's probably going to make a mistake or two. And if your running game struggles the way that it did last week against the Giants, you're in massive trouble. You can eke by the Giants with Drew Lock at quarterback on the road when your running game can't get going. But if it doesn't on Sunday, I don't think New Orleans can keep up. So I'll give you my final score prediction in this one. I like the Commanders to win it 30-17. I think maybe one of those touchdowns comes late for the Saints. I think Washington maybe gets away from the Saints late in the third quarter of this game. I just don't love the matchup at all. So that's my final pick here for the Washington Commanders to go in there on Sunday and beat New Orleans. I'll hand the mic over now to Jordan and tell me what I said that was completely wrong, even though I know you are not happy with your black and gold right now, and you're probably not going to give me much sunshine and rainbows over there.
Oh, no. I'm never going to give sunshine and rainbows about this team.
I bet you were about 2009, about 2018. I bet you were.
A little, 2019 too, but that's another story about another time. So I agree with that. This game can get ugly. It has get ugly written all over because you're out there with Jake Haener against Jaden Daniels, who's been playing the whole season. So he knows it. He's probably going to be comfortable. But there's a little caveat. This could be a prime look-ahead spot that the Commanders are in because they got the Eagles next week.
Okay,
so they could be, undermine the Saints. Like, okay, they're over with Rizzy Ball and all this and whatever. So they could get caught up like that. It would have to be close, like you said, because they can score.
Shout out Darren Rizzy for, they're 3-1 since he took over. Like, they've played
more
well.
More than Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
So,
no.
a
Dennis Allen shot in mid-December from Jordan. He cannot let the guy off the hook.
The body's still warm, okay? The body's still warm.
No, it's not. It is ice cold for Coach Allen. Beck, you've spent some years watching Jaden Daniels play and got some black and gold in your blood. Any chance the Saints can catch him in a look-ahead spot here?
No.
That's a quick answer from producer Jacob Beck, and that's why we pay him monster salary to push the buttons over there. All right, let's come back and talk a little LSU SMU hoops. We got LSU and SMU tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Dean Ralsky covers the Mustangs for Run 3. He'll jump aboard coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
If you want to watch the Saints and Commanders or LSU SMU, you can do it at LeBear's Baton Rouge. Is an awesome place to go watch games every single weekend or on the weeknights as well. Make it your game day headquarters. All the games are on their giant screen TVs, and I was curious if they would go to the LSU basketball game when they played Kansas State a couple of last month, and it was streaming. They did. They fired it right up. I didn't even ask. I was planning to watch it on my laptop from there while we were there for an event. Nope, they put it on. So you can watch some LSU hoops there on Saturday and certainly NFL action all day on Sunday. Make it your game day home for all the football and basketball action this winter. Plus, the Penn Play app is live in Louisiana. So score big at LeBear's Baton Rouge, however you want to play. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 for help.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
So LSU and SMU have entered into agreement. The Tigers and Mustangs will play in Frisco, Texas tomorrow at 3 o'clock. SMU will, quote-unquote, return the trip next year down in New Orleans. A couple neutral site games just in close proximity to both campuses. Great opportunity for LSU against another Power 5 opponent in the ACC's SMU Mustangs. Dean Ralsky covers SMU for On 3. Good enough to give us a little bit of time on this Friday to talk about it. Dean, thanks for the time. How are you?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm doing well. It's getting busy for this time of year for SMU, but I'm doing well. Thank you.
It's busy for everybody who's covering college athletics right now, especially if you're on the football side, because it just never sleeps with the portal. But let's talk a little bit of hoops. I'm curious, Dean, you had up there in Dallas Rob Lanier, who took over the program and had a rough first year, but improved that win total by 10, won 20 games last year, and was fired. Andy Enfield brought in a week later. What precipitated that move for what looked to be a really good improvement in year two?
And that's right. And it got a lot of national media attention when Lanier got fired, because you're right. On paper, it looked like you saw clear improvements from year one to year two. But watching this basketball team, they lost 5 of their last 6 games. And it just felt like right towards the end there, this team and program wasn't headed in the right direction. So while the team was headed on the decline, this university was headed to the ACC, and they felt like they needed to make a change, and they did.
So they bring in Andy Enfield, who kind of made a name for himself at Florida Gulf Coast with Dunk City, went out to USC for 11 years, went to 5 NCAA tournaments, and won 60% of his games there. He's now the new head man at SMU. Have you felt some energy in the Metroplex since Enfield has gotten there?
Absolutely. I think that's the right word to describe it, energy. This team plays with, high tempo, getting out in transition, and, they're athletic. Like you said, he got famous for Dunk City. They dunk the ball a lot. They can shoot the 3-ball really well. So it's been an exciting team to watch so far this season.
Yeah, you mentioned how they like to get out and run 85.8 points per game. That's 15th in the country. They're 21st in offensive efficiency, but I noticed they're 66 in defensive efficiency, which is good as well. Is it a balanced attack, or would you say that the offense is the identity of the program?
So far, the offense is definitely the identity. The defense has struggled at times. When you bring in, 8 new transfers, only 3 returning guys, and a brand new coaching staff, this team just is still learning to play as a team. And I think some of the struggles you're seeing are on the defensive side, and they've gotten better as the season's gone on, but it's certainly not a finished product. But the offense has been there since the first game.
Boopy Miller, LSU fans probably familiar with him from his time at Wake Forest. LSU's played Wake Forest 3 of the last 4 years, and he's been the point guard there, also at Central Michigan before going to SMU. But what about the point guard for the Ponies?
Yeah, he had a really nice start. Again, when this team was still trying to figure out their identity, they relied on him a lot. But these past couple games, only 13 points in the month of December. He struggled a little bit shooting the ball recently, but he's someone that has the proven production, averaged 16 points at Wake Forest a year ago. So SMU fans, are still expecting him to be a big part of this team.
As far as the guards on the outside, Akendo, Harris, what can you tell us about the backcourt that Miller will be working with?
Yeah, Chuck Harris was one of the few guys that stuck around from the Rob Lanier team at SMU, and he's thrived in his role, really that first man off the bench for SMU. He can shoot the 3-ball really well, and he's proved that. And then Kario Oquendo, again, another man that comes off the bench for the Mustangs, started out a little bit slow, but he put up 20-plus points in each of the last 2 games, so he's really come on for the Mustangs.
All right, I'm going to try this. We'll see how I do. Samet Yigatolo is a freshman big, 7'2". What can you tell us about his game?
Well, he was actually not cleared to play until the 3rd game of the regular season,
Okay.
So he has not played in every game so far. But when he's played, he's been a big impact for this team, whether it be on the boards. We've seen him block numerous shots already. A 7'2", 20-year-old freshman from Turkey. It's pretty fun to watch him play, and he's just getting better as the season's going on.
I know that you mentioned SMU playing fast, playing free, dunking the ball. LSU actually is the 25th ranked team in terms of pace in the country. SMU right around 60. So the Tigers love to get out and run as well. You expecting a track meet tomorrow?
It certainly feels that way. Again, with SMU struggles a little bit early on in the season on the defensive side, the one thing that they've been consistent about is putting up points on the board. But with that being said, yes, LSU will definitely have opportunities to keep up with SMU and maybe even take over.
Tell us about the venue for tomorrow. As much as you know about it, I'm not sure if you've been over to the Comerica Center. And what kind of environment do you expect as far as SMU fans go tomorrow there at 3 o'clock?
Yeah, so it's in Frisco, about 30 minutes north of Dallas, so not too far away at all. I've never been to the venue, so I don't know too much about it. But I think SMU fans could travel pretty well. You know, the tough part for them is a lot of students have finals going on this week, including tomorrow on Saturday. So you may not get the best student draw, but I think if you're an SMU fan, you know, you don't have football to worry about till next week. So there's no reason to make the short trip up to Frisco.
All right, this is going to be a tough question, but it's a big picture one for you. I was born in 1988. SMU athletically has really never mattered in my entire life. If I asked you what the next decade looks like for SMU as a member of the ACC, is it going to look radically different in your opinion than it has for my entirety of my life? And I realize I'm asking that as they go play in a 12-team college football playoff. That's basically why I'm asking the question.
Well, I think what they're hoping for is just more of what they've had in their first year. You know, you've got women's volleyball who hosted part of the NCAA tournament. They were a 2 seed. Men's soccer made it to the Elite Eight in soccer and lost a heartbreaker there. And as you said, you know, now SMU making the college football playoff. And basketball, they're off to a pretty good start. So I think it's just more of the same. That's what they're going to want moving forward.
Dean, we really appreciate a little bit of time. Get back to the football side of things. Enjoy some basketball tomorrow, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, man.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me on.
Dean Ralsky covers SMU for On 3, and it'll be should be a fun one tomorrow. I didn't have a full segment to get into kind of my thoughts on this game, so I figured I would do it just kind of on the back of Dean's interview there. It's an interesting matchup between these two teams with LSU and SMU because you're talking about two teams that really want to run. You're talking about two teams that really score. But you're also talking about two teams that have done a good job defending as far as shooting percentage goes. So if you look at offensively, like as I mentioned, SMU is 21st in the country in offensive efficiency. They score 85.8 points a game. That's 15th in the country. They want to run. They're 79th in possessions per game, which, keep in mind, this is not football. There are 360-plus teams. 79th is very much in the top half. LSU's 27th in that category. So you see points from SMU. You see pace from LSU. You see a lot of that. But you also look at opposing shooting percentage, and LSU is 20th in the country, and SMU is 26th. We're still a little bit early as far as statistics go to tell the entire story. This is probably a more accurate reflection towards the end of January with all of February and into March to play when the Patsies in the cupcake games are kind of neutralized by conference competition. But it's fascinating to me to look at these two teams that do defend pretty well on the first shot, but they do want to run and score. So I look at the pace and the points per game and I go, this game's going to be in the 80s. And then I look at the way that these two teams have played defensively, and I suggest, okay, maybe that it doesn't get there because they do a decent job of defending. SMU, as I'm talking about, they're good on paper. You look at what they've actually done against their competition, though. They played Butler at Butler. That's a 7-3 Butler team. They lost 81-70. That's not a great defensive effort. Mississippi State came to Dallas, played them in Moody, and Mississippi State won that game 84-79. That's not great defense either. I watched the condensed version of that game last night, and Mississippi State did a really good job of creating good shots, and they knocked down a lot of threes in that game. And so when you look at a Power 5 team, and Mississippi State's good. Mississippi State crushed Pittsburgh, by the way. You all saw Pitt when LSU struggled with them up at the Greenbrier. Mississippi State's good. Newsflash, they're in the SEC. Most of the SEC teams are very, very good. But they had trouble in those two games against Power 5 competition. Butler is a Big East team. They're Power 5 competition. They won 2 games against Washington State and Virginia. They beat Washington State 77-60 in Palm Springs. Not a great Washington State team. They have not beaten a Power 5 team to this point. And they beat Virginia 63-51. Of course, Virginia's going to slow the game down. That's what they do. But Virginia lost Tony Bennett less than a month before the first game. So that's not a Virginia team that has the guy who built this into a powerhouse over the last decade. So one interesting stat that I pulled up, Mississippi State is the only team to beat SMU on the backboards. And that's going to be important for LSU to do that. We talked in that interview about Boopie Miller, who's their point guard. It'll be Miller against Sears. Those two guys are small. Miller's about 5'11", Sears probably 5'10". Their veteran, Miller, has played at Wake Forest and Central Michigan, now SMU. Sears transferring in from Tennessee Martin to LSU. Miller struggled a little bit to shoot it the last couple of weeks, but he's been pretty good from 2 at 50%, and he's a great free throw shooter at 84%. Those two guys, Miller and Sears, will be running the show in this game. They're undersized point guards. They want to get out and run. LSU has made it. I mean, this is on the record. McMahon in a press conference, without Jordan Reed, who we like to throw the ball to in the half court. You don't have him anymore. We want to create the open floor, and we want to get the ball and go. And I expect LSU to do that in a big way. I'm curious how LSU defends Samet Yigatolo. It's from Turkey. He's got 2 G's in his name with little accent marks at the top of them. It's hard to pronounce, but Yigatolo is what it says on the pronunciation guide. He is a 7'2" freshman from Turkey. He's scoring 11.6 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, shooting 64% from the floor, and has not attempted a 3. He is a true back-to-the-basket 7-footer. LSU doesn't really have a lot of guys to match up with him. Now, Yigatolo is not going to be confused with a quick player. He is lumbering and slow and deliberate and plodding. Like, he is everything you think of a 7'2" freshman. So it's not like he's going to dominate you with quickness and ability around the rim. But I saw Mississippi State leave him one-on-one a couple times, and they had a hard time kind of dealing with him as he puts it on the floor and moves. So you probably have to dig down on a big 7-footer like that, and that creates open looks for guys like he talked about, like Okendo and Harris, who have been great shooting the 3. Okendo is shot at 54%. He's made 8 of his last 11 from 3. So that's a guy you got to watch out for. And Harris is 43% from 3 as well. So the more I look at this game, the more I look at matchups, I think that it's going to be pretty high scoring. LSU's going to have to keep up offensively, and you've got to try to win the backboard, which only Mississippi State has done. Side note, which may not have a huge impact on the game, 2 Will Wade era players on this SMU team. You may remember him, you may not. Johan Traore was a 5-star that signed with LSU, and then Will Wade got in trouble and got fired, and then boom, you've got him going to Auburn. He ended up going to UC Santa Barbara, and now is at SMU, but he signed with LSU as a 5-star. Jarrell Colbert was a 3-star signee for LSU that sat on the bench for 1 year at LSU under Wade and then transferred out. He went to Kansas State, then went to Houston. Now he's at SMU, 4 colleges in 4 years for Jarrell Colbert. But those two guys thought it was an interesting note. LSU roots, but are playing for SMU now. Both guys come off the bench and usually play about 10 minutes in every game. So I'm excited to watch this one tomorrow. It should be fun. It should be up and down, and it's a big opportunity for LSU in what's probably a quad 2 game at a neutral site against an ACC team. If you can win this game, you're looking 11-1 right between the eyes in non-conference play. They've got to try to get this thing. Looking forward to it. I'm excited because based on Instagram, LSU's going to be wearing white uniforms. And y'all have heard me complain about uniforms for 3 months. And I'm really happy they're wearing white uniforms in this one because I think those look a lot better than the road uniforms that don't have any white on them at all. Seem a little harsh to me. I like the white ones with purple and gold trim. They'll be in those tomorrow. 3 o'clock is when tip-off is cranked up. You can listen on Eagle 98.1, our sister station, at 2:30. Chris Blair and John Brady will have the call in the pregame show. Thanks to Dean Ralsky for jumping aboard. We got one more order of business. Just take it or leave it, and we'll get out of here on a Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Your buying experience at Genesis is going to be luxury in every way. I know a lot of people don't love to go to the dealership. You feel like there's a lot of pressure. That's never going to be the case at Genesis of Baton Rouge. But if you still have that fear, that's okay. You can go to genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every car on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. And you can actually purchase a vehicle without ever setting foot on the lot. You can have one of their brand ambassadors drive the car to you for a test drive, send them back to the dealership. They've got a digital delivery. They've got e-contracts. You never have to set foot on the lot, like I said. If that's the buying experience you're looking for, Genesis of Baton Rouge can help you out with that. And when you complete that process, you will get a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty as well as 3 years of complimentary valet maintenance. That means they bring it to you for the maintenance. It's awesome, awesome deals. And an awesome, awesome group of people over at Genesis Baton Rouge. Highly recommend you check them out. They're on Airline near Pico, across from Women's Hospital. Great, great partner here at the Hunt Palmer Show. We love the folks at Genesis of Baton Rouge. genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
All right, we're about done here on a Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. We're brought to you by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. Highly suggest you check out the folks over at Corks for all your holiday parties, year-end parties, birthday parties, retirement parties, feed the office, whatever it is. They can help you out with that. If you're not feeding the office and you just want to feed yourself, Corks always a great option. I tell you this most weeks. I try to tell you every week, but most weeks. If you're hankering for a po' boy in Baton Rouge, thinking, where can I get a good po' boy? Corks has a fantastic po' boy. The shrimp is fantastic. That's my preference. Catfish po' boy, not the worst thing I ever had. I'm just a shrimp guy from that perspective. Get on by Corks and grab a po' boy today or this weekend. Appreciate them for bringing our Friday shows each and every week. I'm about to head over to Rouse's. I'll be there from 3 to 5 o'clock. Florida Boulevard location. Hope you can come see me over the next 2 hours. But I got one thing left to do before I go to Rouse's, and that, of course, is take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
Today's hottest stories in sports, news, and sometimes even Hunt's life. The question is, will he take them or leave them?
Wow.
All right.
Fancy intro.
Yes, thank you to our production guys getting that done. That was pretty solid. I had a little bit of direction for it, but they made all the edits, so good stuff there. But first one here, the Miami Dolphins have released Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ played in 9 games and had 9 catches for 55 yards. The 32-year-old's career is effectively over. Take it or leave it?
I will take it. I think that's the end of the line for Odell. That's a good run. He was burst on the scene. I was big time beating the drum in I guess that would in the draft of 2014, that Jarvis would be the better pro than Odell. I just liked his skill set a little bit more predictably. I don't know who was the better NFL receiver. Jarvis was insanely productive, set records for catches as a rookie in the first 3 years.
Odell probably had a high.
Yeah, and he probably made more money. But they were both really good. That was a really good LSU offense in 2013. This just in. So if that's it for Odell, heck of a run.
Yeah, obviously, injuries, some off the field things.
He was a little quick to to handing out the cash on the sideline.
Yeah, and
But I did like the fact that Michigan fans thought that Odell handing out like $500 on the sideline was very similar to the founder of Oracle giving Bryce Underwood $12 million.
It is almost the exact same.
I got a lot of that on Twitter.
It is almost the exact same situation.
Every single Michigan fan's response to that Instagram reel was dumber than the one before it. It was remarkable that a group of people could collectively look that stupid, but they did.
Yeah, I do think, though, OBJ definitely... I mean, he started getting all those injuries later, and then in the off the field stuff with his dad, like saying he should have been playing more, and it just became a mess. He could have been. I mean, the way he was playing with the Giants, and even that first year with Cleveland, he could have been like a Hall of Fame wide receiver, I think. But it just didn't work out. But he's still pretty solid career overall.
It was good.
All right, last one here. Devondre Campbell, former All-Pro linebacker for the 49ers, refused to enter the game in the third quarter of last night's loss to the Rams. Campbell was released today by the 49ers. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I'll take it.
That was going to be pretty quick. His teammates said in the postgame, like, he's probably going to get cut soon.
I don't understand.
This may be an overreaction by me. It may be. I don't know. We as fans want so badly for the players on our teams to care a lot about our teams.
Yeah.
And it feels increasingly like almost no one does. In college football, everyone transfers every year. Same thing with college basketball. You're talking about the NBA, guys just hold out. I got to get traded. I'm not playing. Major League Baseball, kind of the same thing. You got trades requested all the time. I'm painting with too broad a brush here, but like there was once upon a time where we felt like guys started in training camp or spring training or whatever the case may be, and like they really wanted to be a part of our team. And maybe that was a mirage the entire time, but increasingly it feels like guys are just out for themselves. And it's a job, I get it, but it's bummer for the fans. And like to not go on the field blows my mind.
That's crazy.
It blows my mind.
Even if you don't care about the 49ers, like, I hate this team, like, you still want to be a professional. Like, now other teams are going to be like, oh, you're going to do this to us? You know, like, it's just not smart.
It's disenchanting. I can't think of what the word should be, but it's disheartening too. The guys feel that way. But that's it for us here on a Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. If you missed any of it, you can always catch it on demand. Anywhere you find your podcast, search the Hunt Palmer Show for full shows. Hunt on Saints, Hunt on LSU. We're back Monday reacting to LSU SMU, Saints Commanders, Heisman Trophy, and the transfer portal. Matt's going to drive you home. I'm headed to Rouse's Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com. Insurance, not the most fun thing to talk about in the world. I know that because I did it for 7 years. Those conversations can be a real bummer at times. But I'll tell you this, I've also been on the other side where something bad has happened and insurance has responded and kept businesses afloat. You never think that's going to happen until it does. But you got to be proactive and not reactive. And that's what the Highland Insurance Group always preaches. And they're happy to be proactive with you. They can make sure that your property and casualty lines are in the markets they're supposed to be, so that the coverages are right and the premium is right. And if something does happen, whether it's a cyber breach, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a bad car accident, those can get really, really expensive really, really fast. The Highland Insurance Group is here to make sure it doesn't for you. Call Jonathan Carver and his team or check them out online. Always invite you to do so. They're right here in Baton Rouge, but online, they're at HighlandIG.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group. You can find them online at HighlandIG.com.